Hello and welcome to Newsnight. I'm Ladi Akiridoluale. It's our pleasure to have you join us. The much-awaited COVID-19 vaccines have started arriving on the African continent. In Nigeria, not only have they arrived, the distribution process to states has commenced, and the country's leaders have been receiving their first jabs, starting, of course, with President Muhammadu Buhari. Because this is a large undertaking to get 70% of the population vaccinated by the end of 2022, how prepared is the country? Also, how about the logistics of distribution and administration, particularly at sub-national levels? Newsnight talks to the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Faisal Shuaib. Dr. Shuaib, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, the vaccines are here, and a rollout program has been announced in phases. Hopefully, by the end of next year, we should achieve herd immunity if everything goes according to the plan. Is that correct?
Yes, hopefully.
Now, give me an idea of the background that led to the selection of the various mixtures of vaccines that are in the plan. Is it a function of our demographics? Is it economic? Is it logistics, such as the storage system capacity and so on? What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so we considered a multitude of factors, clearly contextualizing the available vaccines to our environment. So it is important that in that complex journey from the National Strategic Cold Store, where the vaccines will be stored, to when the vaccines get to the arm of the individual, that we have very good cold chain, and that everybody who is along that supply chain knows exactly what to do, and he's able to do it seamlessly with all of his colleagues. So when you look at the different vaccines that we're looking to introduce within the system, you will see that we've carefully chosen vaccines that fit into what is our default setting. So for example, the AstraZeneca vaccine can be kept at a cold chain environment of +2 to +8 degrees Celsius. Now, this is the cold chain environment that most of our routine immunization vaccines are kept. And in the last few years, the federal government, working with development partners and our donors, have invested heavily in cold chain equipment that can keep our vaccines potent within that temperature range. So it was really a no-brainer that the AstraZeneca vaccine will be one of our top choices. And then when you look at the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well, of course, there's additional logistical challenges that you have to overcome when you give the first dose and then you're looking for the individual to come back for the second dose. And then when you look at the availability of the same kind of temperature requirement as the AstraZeneca, then it does make sense that we select it as a second vaccine. For other vaccines, such as the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine that requires ultra cold chain, that is temperatures of up to -80 degrees Celsius, while we started making plans and invested a little in getting ultra cold chain equipment in at the national level and in some states, we also know that it presents a more complex logistical challenge compared to the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So it was really an easy choice for us to make.
In terms of staffing of personnel to administer this, because it's one thing to procure, then you've got to get it to the people, but some people have to actually take it to those who have to be vaccinated. In some instances, explain the procedure to them, if there are any possible side effects to watch out for and so on. How far has that gone? How well has it gone? The idea of getting the right personnel, because you're talking of hundreds of millions of people here.
Absolutely. So we're leveraging on our health system. Even though we have challenges with human resources in our health system, we've been able to identify critical human resources that will be trained. As a matter of fact, we're just finishing up the second round of cascaded training. So we finished the national level, which involved health workers at the national and people coming from the state. So we're just in the process of cascading those trainings to the state level, to the local government level, and then the health facility level. We've been able to go around and get health workers that will be retrained. But we're also looking to hire additional health workers that are not within the system, some of them that are unemployed, because apart from the vaccination process that we're rolling out, you expect that the health workers that are currently in the system should continue their routine work, right? So people are going to come back for routine checks, treatment for malaria, for pneumonia, the everyday things that they do. And those have to continue while we're rolling out the COVID-19 vaccine. So we've made a provision for both categories of health workers. And we know that people need the information, they need the skills to carry out these exercises. But it so happens that we're having procedures that they are quite familiar with. So it's an intramuscular injection into the left upper arm. Right. And this is a procedure that they are familiar with. Having said that, we also know that we've added the additional programmatic aspects of the vaccination, such as our electronic data system. Right. So health workers have to be trained on those because those are new introductions that they are not familiar with. And the trainings that we're rolling out have nicely incorporated those aspects into the training.
That brings me to the question of the battle that other countries, particularly Africa and indeed the world has been. Many of these vaccines were created, they were developed before we got to know that the variants of COVID-19 came about faster than they traditionally would have. And therefore, that's added complication to some of this, because in some of the instances, some of the vaccines, the manufacturers have been quite honest enough to say, look, it may not be as effective if you are dealing with this particular strain or that particular strain, which has necessitated some kind of intra-country studies to see what it is that each individual country is dealing with, and therefore what kind of combination of vaccines could be useful in this instance. The most obvious example in our own case for Nigeria would be South Africa. They've had one or two strains. They have their own indigenous strain. And from the research that we have done in country in Nigeria, we too have one or two of these other strains. Has all this been factored into this rollout plan, and to see whether or not, if there are complications along the line in terms of the administration, we can adjust quickly?
Absolutely. Those are critical factors that were determined before the decision was made to roll out, and the specific dates that we're going to be rolling out the vaccines. So what so happens is that the predominant variant of the COVID-19 vaccine in South Africa is the strain that is known as the B1351. This B1351 has been found to be resistant to the AstraZeneca vaccine in South Africa. But working with the NCDC and many research institutions, we've not found this strain in Nigeria. What it means is that the strains that we have are susceptible to the vaccine. When we give the vaccines will be able to protect against those strains that currently exist in Nigeria. We've been looking and we've not found the South African strain. We found the UK strain, the B117, but we've also are aware that that strain is susceptible to the COVID-19, the AstraZeneca vaccine. That is to say, the vaccine protects against that variant. We're working very closely with the NCDC to watch out for the existence of this South African strain. This is why it is particularly important that we roll out our vaccines rapidly, so that we don't give additional opportunities for the strains to populate Nigeria, or for even the strains that are in Nigeria to mutate and become, non-susceptible to the AstraZeneca vaccine that we have.
Again, worldwide, there are people who begin or they campaign against vaccinations. So the question of awareness, understanding of the science is very important. It appears as if in Nigeria now, more and more people are beginning to see, unlike the situation in the recent past, that look, this COVID-19 thing is not a hoax, it's not a scam, it's real. Because more and more people now know people who have been affected by it. But in the issue of vaccination, there is the anti-vaxxers group. It's not unique to Nigeria. But we've had this even with other vaccinations we have attempted. It took us so long to get rid of polio for this same reason. It took us so long to get rid of other things that we could have gotten rid of a long time ago. What's the state in terms of awareness? You and I can understand the importance of this, but this has got to go way down to the rural areas and so on, where the level of literacy may not be so high, the understanding of the science may not be so deep. What's the arrangement for that?
So right before we even contemplated bringing in vaccines to Nigeria, we were well aware that there was vaccine hesitancy, and like you correctly stated, Ladi, vaccine hesitancy is a global phenomenon, and the way to approach them are exactly similar. That you have to provide the right information to people that you are trying to get to, receive the vaccine. That is to say, you cannot afford to dismiss their questions, their concerns, because they are not scientists. They are not professors of public health. So you have to do the extra work that is required. Yes, we've gone through all of this effort to bring the vaccines to Nigeria, but that effort to also convince people that these vaccines are safe, giving them the right information to address their concerns, that is really part of the work that we as scientists must continue to do. We already started, several weeks ago by engaging the traditional leaders, religious leaders, because the lessons from the polio eradication program was that you have to go to the gatekeepers, the local leaders, get their buy-in, get their ownership. Then you leave it to them to communicate to the followers. That is what we've been doing. We've been engaging with different stakeholders, asking them to communicate to their membership. We've also shared frequently asked questions around the most frequent questions, the most frequent concerns that people have around the vaccines, and allowing independent voices to speak to these issues, to communicate to these issues, so that they are clear that there is no conspiracy around the vaccine, so that people are clear that we, as a government, as the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, have gone through due diligence to make sure that all of the processes are followed in terms of making sure that the vaccines that are going to be approved for use in Nigeria are safe and effective.
But this is a difficult task because...
Without a shadow of doubt.
Yeah, because you have cultural hurdles, social hurdles, and then you have those who are just immune, if you like, if I use that phrase, to change. They're very suspicious. And as has been said, we've seen this in the past. But if this vaccination and the amount of work that has been put in is to work, we have to achieve a large level of compliance. People have to come out. Do you fear that the bridge between science and these barriers may be too far apart? Do you?
Not really. While I acknowledge and recognize the challenges ahead, while I know that we cannot take any individual, any communities for granted, I'm also well aware from my experiences in the polio eradication program with many vaccination campaigns that Nigerians are logical people, they are rational people. And if you provide Nigerians with the right information in a way that they understand, sometimes in their languages, in their dialects, once they get it, then they will take that information and run away with it. So the onus really is not on the Nigerians. The onus is on us, the scientists, the practitioners, to put in the extra work of communicating, providing the information to Nigerians. And like you rightly stated, at the beginning of your questioning, we've seen a gradual shift from a situation where up to 75% of Nigerians that had any sentiments around vaccines, a few weeks ago, said, no way, no how, we're not going to take these vaccines. We're now beginning to see that, over 50% of individuals are saying, yes, we're going to get the vaccine. And then the remaining 50% or thereabouts cut between 25% that are saying no, they will not, and 25% that are not so sure. So if you are going to do an analysis of those who are not so sure, then those are people that probably are sitting on the fence.
Right.
And once we're able to provide information to them, and then we're optimistic that they'll be able to understand. However, we cannot rest on our oars. It is very, very important that we reach a critical number of Nigerians to be able to achieve herd immunity. If we do not reach those numbers, then we're going to be here for a very, very long time. We'll not be able to return back to normal, or at least near normal, in terms of our livelihood. So this is a piece of work that we take very, very seriously. And this is why we appreciate the role of the media in making sure that they communicate to Nigerians, because the media in Nigeria is very vibrant, very knowledgeable about the issues, and so far we're really, really impressed by the work that the media is doing.
In terms of the logistics, because that's the other part of this, Nigeria is not having the same characteristics all over. You have riverine areas, you have places where the topography is very difficult, then you have areas where security is a challenge, as you've seen, of course, and in this particular instance of vaccination, you're talking of a whole lot more in terms of numbers than you did with anything else that we have attempted before now. Do you think that, all things being equal, this is doable, particularly in the time frame that you've given? I've listened to you earlier where you talked about how this was going to happen. It arrives in Abuja, they distribute to the level of the states take it from there, and then go to local governments and further down and so on. These are along infrastructure, roads, bridges, and so on. Are you concerned that that could be where, if every other thing is okay, there might be hiccups?
We're not new to Nigeria. We're Nigerians. We've been here in this space for decades. We know the terrain very well. So we've made advanced preparations for those riverine areas. So as part of our strategy, we've established specific teams that will go across those difficult barriers, those riverine areas, the deserts, the mountainous areas where Nigerians live. So we've been able to make sure that logistical arrangements are made for health workers around those areas to vaccinate those people. We're working with the private sector, with oil companies, for example, that operate in the riverine areas.
Right.
They're providing, they're putting in their bits in terms of boats, life jackets, to make sure that we're able to get to the last mile. I want to reiterate that this is a complex program where a lot of effort, a lot of resources will be required to get to the last mile. But that is exactly why we're here, to provide those types of services. They will be difficult, but we're not here because we expect the work to be easy. That is why we're very excited about how the work that frontline workers will be doing will be making a huge difference in making sure that we reduce the number of people who die from COVID-19. But beyond that, we're also mindful that if we're able to control and eventually eliminate COVID-19, then we'll be able to turn our attention back to the routine diseases that continue to occur, the routine challenges that we have with our suboptimal health system. So the earlier we get done with this, the earlier we're able to turn the corner in terms of addressing COVID-19, then the better for everybody, especially the most vulnerable people who live in our rural communities.
How about security?
Insecurity is a challenge everywhere, but we've also have experience from the Northeast, especially from the South during the polio eradication program, that you just need to work with communities and also find ways of engaging with all stakeholders in those insecure areas. So I'll give you an example. During the polio eradication program, the Nigerian military actually went out with the oral polio vaccines and did the vaccinations in themselves. So there are places where our health workers were not able to access, and the military went and made sure that they vaccinated, children in those areas. As you're well aware, our security forces also have the medical corps. So
Yes.
we expect that in those areas where civilians will not be able to access, that they will be able to roll out their personnel to access those insecure areas and give the vaccinations. Again, that requires a lot of very intricate planning. Those are the kinds of conversations that we've had in the last few weeks, really using our maps, our new technology to understand where people live and how we'll be able to advance the best mechanisms to reach them.
Of course, you've talked about the fact that the president, the vice president, other top government functionaries will be encouraged to take this vaccination so that the people can see that it's not just about the people, but those leading them are leading in this particular instance also from the front. But are you concerned that this will then make people go back? Because I've heard a lot of people say, "Ah, well, now there are vaccines and we've got the vaccines, even between when they arrived and now." I say, well, look, so life will return to normal even as we wait to get vaccinated, because once you are vaccinated, then you are done. And in some instances, one has had to point out that I'm not sure that's correct. I've listened to some of the medical experts, and they are not so sure that once you get vaccinated, then you are immune. Could you please enlighten about that again so that we really understand where we are? This vaccination or vaccines, does that now mean the battle with COVID is over?
The vaccinations do not mean that the battle is over. What the vaccination means is that we've started winning more battles and that the end of the war is in sight. What it means is that you are getting vaccines that will protect you. The vaccines will protect you against COVID-19 vaccine, especially severe disease and death. This is what the data is showing. You can already see in countries that have rolled out the vaccination program how the number of people dying is already dropping, right? So the expectation is that while we're rolling out the vaccination program, we want people to continue to wear face masks, do social distancing, observe hygiene, because in the first place, when you take the first dose, you have to wait for the second dose. In between the first and the second dose, you are still susceptible because your immune system is not fully, ready to defend you, right? You get some protection, but not the kind of protection that you need, right? So after the second dose, then you can be talking about the fact that, yes, you are protected. But beyond that, there are still people around you who may not have had the vaccine. So you have to reach that herd immunity. Once you reach that herd immunity, you stop the transmission, then you can say the war is over. But of course, the vaccines are tools that we need to win this war. But the war will be won when in every community we win the battle against COVID-19 with vaccines, with non-pharmaceutical interventions. So it is very, very critical that we don't take for granted the fact that these vaccines are here and that they will help with turning the corner when it comes to COVID-19.
How cooperative have the states and local governments been? Because as you pointed out earlier in this interview, different states have different levels in terms of capacity in terms of available funding to help with this and all of that. But in general, on average, how supportive, how creative, how have they reacted to this rollout plan? Because as you pointed out, it's a massive undertaking. How supportive have they been, especially given the precedent that we had when COVID-19 first of all arrived, and there were some people in some of the states who were saying, no, 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 we don't have COVID here. They didn't even allow the NCDC to go in and test, and there were difficulties with accessing the populace to see what was really going on. In this particular instance, is the story different?
Well, from the engagements that we've been having with the Nigeria Governors Forum, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of interest in how we're going to roll out the vaccines. Right? People in the states want the vaccines to come. Again, I know that there are stories of vaccine hesitancy, but for the most part, people want to take the vaccine, and what the governors are also showing is the leadership that is required. They are the ones that are asking that, what do you want us to do beyond the resources that we need to provide? Leadership. What else do you want us to do? We're getting our cold chain systems fixed. We're making sure that people are getting trained. Dr. Faisal, what else can I do to make sure that people can get back to living their lives normally, right? So we're getting a lot of support from the governors, and I know that in the local government areas as well, the leadership are preparing. So in some of the areas where we've started, meeting with the local government teams to prepare for the next level of vaccinations, that is at the ward level, at the health facility level. We see a lot of concerted effort and dedication from the local government workers. So we're optimistic that when we start rolling out to the states, that we'll have people who will come out in their droves to make sure that we have a successful program. Clearly will be beset by barriers and challenges, because that's just the way of the human condition, right? But what we're not lacking is that enthusiasm and the confidence that we'll get this job done, working with all of the critical stakeholders. That is what we are as Nigerians. Will get the job done, no matter how difficult it is.
Let me take you away from the COVID-19 vaccine issue a little. There is the presence of other challenges that you're having also to deal with, even while dealing with this. Ebola has made a resurgence in some African communities, and there's those who have said, while we are chasing this, we hope this will not slip in like it did the other time into the country. And yet, there are other things that we were dealing with. You pointed out some of them earlier, before COVID came in, and which are still ongoing in spite of the fact that we're dealing with COVID. There's Lassa fever, amongst others. Malaria still continues to kill a lot of people. Do you think, as someone pointed out to me before this interview, that we're going to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time? Because the COVID undertaking is massive, but then these other things are also there, surveillance and so on. What do you make of that entire scenario? Are we likely to possibly have some difficulty in not dropping the ball because we're juggling many things at the same time?
That is why we have, a very coordinated approach with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 to make sure that it's the whole of society approach. But at the same time, we're making sure that all of the critical agencies and ministries that are responsible for different aspects of the response don't drop the ball. So we're working very closely with the NCDC and keeping a close watch, on our backwaters, making sure that our ports are secure. With elevated the alert rate in terms of looking out for symptoms and signs of Ebola, making sure that passengers, have their temperatures taken, and if anybody, looks sick, that they are taken to a secluded area for additional testing. We've learned the lessons from 2014 that if anybody looks sick, when there's an outbreak of such an infectious disease anywhere around Nigeria, in the West African sub-region, or anywhere in the African sub-region, that you have to be alerted. And I know that we are alert and watching out for all of this. Again, these are very, very challenging times, but we also know that we have the resources, we have the human resources, and we have the dedication to put in the hard work that is required to make sure that we address these multiple challenges. We know that the advent of the vaccine provides a unique opportunity for us to take control of COVID-19. But even for the Ebola disease, in 2014, we did not have a vaccine for it. But we now do have a vaccine for Ebola, and we're already in conversations with the World Health Organizations, to prepare for potential request for the vaccine if at all we have an outbreak of Ebola in Nigeria. So all of those preparations are taking place. The surveillance that is required for Lassa fever and other infectious diseases continue to take place. And we have different teams that are working together. But in the end, it has to be a coordinated approach, and that is what we're doing together with our sister agencies.
You don't think at any point you might get overwhelmed? Because the way you've described it now, it sounds overwhelming.
Well, Ladi, we have a moral and ethical responsibility as public health officers that we're the front line of defense against these infectious diseases, that it is only when we are standing, we're resolute, that we'll be able to defeat these infectious diseases and protect all Nigerians. We cannot afford to be exhausted. We cannot afford to drop the ball. It's part of the sacrifices that you sign up to for public service. It's just like we have in the military, right? The military men have to protect Nigerians against any form of invasion. For us, it is against infectious diseases, and there is no room to say you're tired. That is what you signed up to, right? Everybody within the Committee of Nation, everybody within Nigeria has his task, has his own responsibility, and it's only when we stand up to those responsibilities that we will be able to deliver on all the things that we envision for a country like ours, that everybody does his job and does it in a way that shows nationalism, that shows integrity, in a way that shows that we really deeply care for our country and our people. So we cannot talk about being fatigued. We cannot talk about being exhausted. Wherever the challenges come, whenever the challenges come, because we care so deeply about our country, we have to reach deep down in our hearts, in all of our being, and extract that extra effort that will make the difference between whether we are successful or we fail. And we cannot afford to fail.
The primary healthcare center is the first port of call for most Nigerians. So beyond COVID, beyond Ebola, beyond all these, give us a status report on how that is now in Nigeria. Do you have complete confidence in the capacity of primary healthcare to take care of any such emergencies that may arise from time to time?
Absolutely not. We have not invested in primary healthcare for decades. It is only with the advent of this administration that we're seeing a purposeful setting aside of resources, for example, in the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, to try and revamp and add resources towards primary healthcare. Yes, we do not have a system that is optimal, but I know because people are doing the best that they can, we're able to address these challenges as they come. But I also know that the system is stretched thin. We do not want to be in this position where there is another outbreak, right? So you definitely don't want an Ebola outbreak in the size of 2014, especially the size that the Liberians, the Sierra Leoneans faced in Nigeria, because we already have a frail health system. This is why all of the people that are talking about the need to invest in primary health care are saying exactly the right things that we want to be done. And I know that there are moves in different quarters to make sure that we invest, set aside some dedicated fund to first and foremost make sure that we have the infrastructure, the right infrastructure all across the land that will be good enough to manage people in a way that assures of quality, that we have the right human resources in these primary healthcare centers that will be able to treat people with the highest level of competence, treat them respectfully, treat Nigerians with the kind of dignity that they deserve. Now, we're still a long ways from there. There's a lot of work that has been done by this administration, with working with the National Assembly to make resources available. But because we spent so many decades not making the right investments, it just appears to be a drop in the ocean. And I know that the Honorable Minister of Health is very passionate about primary health care. We've had conversations with the Honorable Minister of Finance and her team around how we need to set out some funds. Now, we also know that the private sector, for example, the coalition of the CACOVID is keen to make sure that this crisis is turned into an opportunity for us to prepare for the next pandemic. This pandemic caught us off guard in terms of our preparedness. We were still able to surmount some of the early challenges,
right,
but we cannot do exactly the same thing next time. So the private sector are already asking us, if federal government shows commitment by putting money on the table, we will put money on the table. And I know that there are a lot of donors who will also contribute towards making these funds available, making sure that we're able to provide the right infrastructure for the primary healthcare centers, the right human resources, people who are well trained, midwives, nurses, doctors, community health extension workers who work very closely with the communities and do it in a way that is sustainable. We cannot continue to kick the can down the road and wait for the next government and the next government to fix this problem. We need to fix these problems now, especially if we're talking about achieving universal health coverage by 2030, if we're trying to achieve the sustainable development goals, if we're trying to make sure that we improve the health of Nigerians. Like we always say and recognize, prevention is better than cure.
Yes.
The way to prevent diseases is by investing in primary health care. We always say that health is wealth. If we want to improve the socioeconomic standing of Nigeria, we have to invest in the health of our people so that when people are healthy, then they'll be able to make the right decisions and they'll be able to support and contribute to our productivity. Everywhere across the world, especially in Southeast Asia, you always see where people invest in healthcare, there is a proportionate and parallel increase in their productivity and their socioeconomic status. Those are lessons that we need to learn in Nigeria.
As we wind this down, let me ask you a double-barreled question to end. The first is, what would be your message going forward now to Nigerians as we embark on this vaccine rollout? What will you be telling them about what to expect, how to react, if there are challenges, if there are triumphs, and so on, over the next, because this is a long period. It's going by the timetable, you're talking of about 24 months. That's number one. Number two is that for the healthcare system generally, its workers, the stakeholders you described and so on, what should be their watchword? What should they be looking out for, even as attention is focused on COVID, but other things are also happening along with it? What should be their watchword? What should they be looking out for? The two questions might be related, but I guess the answers might be a bit different.
Right. So for the COVID-19 rollout, what I will tell Nigerians is that we take the responsibility of vaccinating Nigerians with the highest degree of seriousness, that we've done all of the rigorous and methodical processes that are required to select and approve the vaccines that will come into Nigerians, that these vaccines are safe, they're effective, they are the surest way, along with the public health measures that we've put in place to help us get back to near normal in terms of our livelihoods, right? So that we can begin to get people working in the oil sector, get people working normally in the bank, so that we can really drag ourselves out from recession. In terms of the messaging to our stakeholders, we have to be consistent and be resolute in terms of identifying how health is important for our socio-economic development. And we cannot continue in a very non-sustainable way, a situation where we have capital flight of over $1 billion US dollars every year. People going abroad to get medical health, medical treatment. That is not sustainable. Meanwhile, if we're able to invest in primary healthcare, then even before people get really, really sick, whether it is from cancer or from uncontrollable diabetes, you are able to detect these diseases very early on if you have a vibrant and functional primary healthcare system. And it is this vibrant primary healthcare system that will feed into a secondary healthcare system and a tertiary healthcare system, so that the tertiary healthcare systems are allowed to do research, they are allowed to take care of the more complicated diseases such as cancers, and subspecialties. But what we have currently is a situation where even for something as basic as malaria, people go to a teaching hospital. That is not the way to go. Right, and I know the Honorable Minister of Health, is working together with stakeholders to see how this can be reversed. But it really has to start from the foundation, strengthening the primary healthcare system, so that people, laddie, so that you can wake up in your morning. If you have a headache, you can look outside of your window, see that you have a functional primary healthcare system, and you just take a walk across and have your blood pressure checked, you have your blood, you do the blood works, and you feel very comfortable about it. You don't have to drive several miles to go to a teaching hospital to get some basic tests done. So it's going to take, resolution from everybody that is involved to understand that we cannot continue doing the same thing, making suboptimal investments in health and expect different results. We have to take the bold steps or go home.
One can only say we wish you the very best of luck. And of course, as we hit the milestones of this, we will come back to you for updates on what is happening. But before I let you go, I have to ask this final question about international politics. And I raise it only because a lot of noise was made about the delay in us getting vaccines and so on. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to enlighten the people on sometimes what it takes to be able to access some of these things, since we are not manufacturing them ourselves and we are competing with other people for these products. Can you give us an idea of what this took to get?
So there were two critical issues when it came to the issue of accessing vaccine in Nigeria. First, there was a global shortage of vaccines. So immediately the vaccines were produced, the more developed countries who were front and center in the development of the vaccines, of course, took more than they needed for their vaccines. Sometimes countries such as Canada got up to 9 times the requirements for their vaccines. So for one Canadian, they had up to, he had up to 9 vaccines. They didn't need to do that, and it's a good thing that they begin to recognize that they didn't need to do that. So there was vaccine nationalism. They kept the vaccines to themselves, and that delayed our ability to access the vaccines. But apart from that, there was also the issue of production, right? These few pharmaceutical companies producing globally for everybody. You can imagine that after taking care of the needs of these developed countries, then we were left to try and negotiate through the COVAX facility and the African Union to get these vaccines. There were countries such as China and India that actually started making out producing the vaccines quite early on. But as Nigerians, we also knew that we're not going to bring to Nigeria any vaccine that had not gone through good quality checks. So in countries such as Argentina, Mexico, and some South American countries, immediately the Chinese regulatory agencies okayed their vaccines. They got the vaccines and started using them. But for us in Nigeria, the Presidential Task Force was very clear. We needed to have a stringent regulatory agencies such as the Food and Drug Administration of the United States or the European, Food and Drug Administration, exactly, to certify these vaccines as safe and effective. Then we also needed the World Health Organization to list these vaccines for emergency use. After those types of certifications, then we had to rely on NAFDAC to do all of the checks, get all of the dossiers, and again, validate that these vaccines were safe for Nigerians. It was only then that we approved the importation of these vaccines. So we went through a very painstaking, careful process of getting the right vaccines that fits our context. This is why it took some time for the vaccines to get here. But it's here finally, and better late than never, right?
And in any case, the kind of numbers of doses that Nigeria needs is not the same as most other countries.
Absolutely. So a colleague of mine, rang me the other day and said, hey, Ghana got their vaccines, Cote d'Ivoire got the vaccines. How come Nigeria hasn't gotten their vaccines? Well, Ghana got 600,000 doses. And from what we hear, the 4 million doses of AstraZeneca that we got was probably one of the highest single shipment of vaccines to any country in the world. So in the end, they say the patient dog is the fattest bone, isn't it? So yes. I believe in the end, all is well that ends well.
Dr. Shoaib, good luck as you embark on this, and best wishes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ladi.
Thank you. That's Newsnight today. Would of course like to hear your views on the conversation you've just heard. Our social media handles are on your screen. You can also listen to Newsnight via podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com, and follow the instructions. I am Ladi Akeredolale. Goodbye.